You know, Adrian, I remember when I first started working for Meridia Technology, I was just a year out of school and I had come from a TCM school and I had stood on my TCM pedestal, and really all that they taught me about TCM, I thought I knew. Obviously I had a master's degree in Chinese medicine. I thought I knew all that there was to know about acupuncture in general. I mean, enough to move out in the world and go and become a specialist. I have to say that I was blown away as I learned that there were so many different ways to practice acupuncture and different styles throughout the world. And when I learned about Ryodoraku, then it was amazing to me that we studied Chinese medicine, and I say that with quotes because that's the umbrella that they put everything under in school. I had no idea that this other form of acupuncture, that you could measure acupuncture points, that science had caught up. They didn't teach me that in school. I didn't learn that until I sat as a new employee in my very first seminar weekend, really learning all the basis from you. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you're a TCMer and this is new to you, it was completely new to me as well.
Yeah, and I remember you were a little resistant to it. And back in those days, honestly, 10 plus years ago, the entire industry was a little more resistant to things that were maybe non-traditional stuff you didn't learn in school. Hey, wait a minute, it's supposed to be like this. And the thing that I like most to see now is how much it's changed and how open people are to technological approaches that enhance the traditional approaches without supplanting them or making anything invalid.
Exactly. Because we were taught in school that there was just one way. You had to do your 10 question diagnosis and come up with the exact pattern, and then you treated. And that is good. And what I realized, I even remember, being a student at PCOM and going to their PCOM symposiums and seeing all the booths and all the things that were there. And I remember seeing you when I was still a student. Never did I know that I would move to Meridian, Idaho, that I would actually work for you. But we would walk by as students and go, oh, if you have a device like that, you don't even know what you're doing as an acupuncturist. That was the mentality. And that was the mentality. Wasn't just me. That was a lot of people back then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Yeah.
And now we've reached a point where we have this modern, wonderful science which supplements what we know about TCM, and it changed the world. Anyway, that's just a little background from a TCMer who has walked this path for 12 years now, or maybe not 12 quite, but it's been amazing to watch the entire field of acupuncture change and embrace a way to measure progress.
Yeah, indeed. And that's a perfect introduction to today. Thank you. Well put, because the purpose of school in many ways is to get you a license. That's about it. You teach you what you need to know so you can pass your tests, so you can get a license, and then your education can begin. And those that kind of continue to learn and grow, I notice, tend to be the most successful, not just financially, but in every way in their acupuncture career. And so this little trip down memory lane, I wanted to start off today by a little self-indulgent trip down my own memory lane, something that we kind of covered in the seminar material that we're talking about today. But I wanted to do a quick show and tell while I tell the story. When I first encountered the idea of Ryodoraku acupuncture, it was demonstrated and taught to me using, in fact, this device right here, which I still have, and very old school. My kids that are all into the retro stuff would probably love to get to play with this. And what you would do is you would take the readings and you'd get them on the little graph there, and then you'd write them down on the piece of paper and you'd make the chart, and then you'd draw your lines and you'd figure out what was above and below the lines, and that's how you would do what was called EMI then, Ryodoraku. And that was the first introduction I had. And that was what was the impetus for me to go to my instructor and say, hey, why is this not computerized? At the time, this was about 2002. And, you know, computers were pretty reasonably productive then. They were pretty capable. And anyway, I told you that because that's kind of how I got started down this road. And that's also how I got started making AcuGraph, which is going to turn 20 next year. Hard to believe. I can't believe I've been at this 20 years. But throughout that time, I also started a little bit of a collection. I don't know why. Some people collect stamps. Some people collect ex-spouses. I collect old Ryodoraku equipment. And just for fun, just for a minute, I wanted to just show you a couple of these things that I've got here, because many of you are probably never going to even encounter this stuff in real life. And the first time I taught this seminar here at our facility in Meridian, Idaho, when we built this facility in 2009 that we're currently in, we built a big classroom so that we could teach. And the first seminar we put on in that big classroom, I set up tables, and I had a whole row of tables, and each one had a piece of this old school equipment that works. They all work. And the paper, and we all got to practice and learn paper graphing just so we would recognize the road that this came from and the past that led to it. But anyway, here's my show and tell. This monster has a drawer under it, as you can see. I picked this guy up in golly, around 2002 when I first got interested, and it was pretty cool because it was, aside from huge and heavy, it was very advanced. It was all digital. It has that little screen on it. It could do a lot of stuff. This guy here, that is the OG. That's the really original old school neurometer. And if you look on the back, you can see that it comes from the Institute of Ryodoraku. And this is kind of the standard when Ryodoraku was first developed, you know, in the 1960s and 70s. This is what everybody used. And that's kind of fun to have around. Got this little guy, same thing, just a meter. This little guy tabletop thing. So as you can see, the state of the art from 1950 basically to 2000 changed very little. And that's incredible. 50 years of doing the same thing. And if you go to Japan today, as I showed in that video, in Japan today, they're still using analog equipment very much like this among the Ryodoraku association over there. Anyway, these are just a few pieces from my collection. I have a whole lot more, but those to me are always really fun. And oh, I didn't bring it in here. I was going to, yeah, I didn't bring it. I was going to show the old school probes that are shaped like a hammer. How many of you have seen those probes? Yeah? The old hammer probe that you would use. And so you'd hold the hammer like this, and it'd go perpendicular, and it'd go into the hand, and it had a cotton cup on it. So that's kind of where it came from. Anyway, that's just for me kind of fun. You know how collectors love to show off their collection. So thanks for indulging me for a minute. But that's where it all came from. And until we decided that meter should be connected to that computer, that's really where the state of the art was at the time. There was a computer program in the early 2000s where you could take the reading with the analog meter, and then you could type the reading into the computer, and it would make a graph on the computer, but you still had to use the old school analog meter to take the readings. And so the fact that you can digitally take the reading and put it directly into the computer without a two-step process and without an analog meter, that was more or less what we brought to the table in the early days. And that that alone was enough apparently to get things started. Anyhow, with that little show and tell thing, I wanted to open it up to questions today, because the real point of being here is to be able to discuss what was covered in the seminar material. I've got the seminar slides if I need to pull any of them up to answer questions, to talk about anything. If there's something you'd like more explanation on, or concept that you'd like to understand better, if there's something you'd like to share, here we go. And feel free to unmute yourself and talk to the group if you'd like to, or you're welcome to answer or to ask questions down in the chat.
We've got one question there about spleen 21. Do you see that?
What is spleen 21 treatment alternatives to prevent pneumothorax puncture that you recommend? Let me show you something, and then there's a variety of them, but the most interesting one that I was taught, again, by that first instructor that taught Ryodoraku, he taught what he called the chicken wing technique. And he would train patients to take their thumbs, and he'd show them how to find spleen 21. And then he'd tell them that they had to chicken wing like that, and it would hurt. It's tender. And he would tell them that they needed to do that 4 times a day for 30 seconds and just stimulate that point. And that was a very effective way to do it. I don't needle spleen 21, even though, if you're shallow, you're safe. But because of the potential pneumothorax, I avoid needling it. Kimberly, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have some perspective. Spleen, first of all, if you understand why spleen 21 is chosen, it's because there are multiple splits. A split means there's an imbalance in a pathway between the right and the left side of the body. And what's the magic number that makes you get spleen 21? Are there 5 splits? 4. If there are 4 or more splits, AcuGrowth will recommend spleen 21. The reason spleen 21 is so powerful is because it is the great luo point, is what it's called, on the spleen channel, and it connects with all the other luo points within the body. If you were just treating one split, you would treat the luo point of that pathway. So if you had 4, let's say you had 5 splits in the graph, you could treat 5 luo points for each of the pathways that are imbalanced, or what AcuGrowth is telling you, you could treat spleen 21. Now, there are a lot of people who don't like to put a needle in spleen 21. I have found that the little tacks, if you'll put a tack on spleen 21, it's very superficial, but it's effective. And then the patient doesn't necessarily have to do the chicken wing. They can
chicken
just
dance.
You've left a tack there, and they can just put their thumb on it and touch it. So that's effective. You could actually send them home with that. You could treat that point with a laser as well. Or if you want to treat the luo points in relation to each of the imbalances, you could do that.
Yeah, and I want to say a word in favor of the tacks. That's by far the fastest, cleanest, easiest way to do that, is just stick the tack on there, and it's very effective. It does a great job. So I knew Dr. Kimberly would go there, and I appreciate that. The other thing, though, I wanted to point out is that back in the early days, we would get a lot of splits. It was just a fact. And you would have spleen 21 coming up all the time because there'd be 4 or more splits. And I was initially taught, oh, no, never remeasure, because the second measurement won't be valid, because the first measurement changes the skin, changes the conductance of the skin. And what we found is that when you have a split, and for those that don't know, I'm sorry, a split is when you measure the same point on both sides of the body. So if you measure lung 9 on one hand and lung 9 on the other, and they measure very differently, that's called a split. They should be roughly the same. And so if they're like this, then what that means is that the internal pathway between the 2 sides of the lung channel is blocked. It's not communicating properly. And we would treat the luo point for lung to open that up. But if you got 4 or more of those, we would just treat spleen 21, the great luo point that would open everything. But what we found is that you can remeasure the side that's low, because when you measure skin electrically, it tends to cause it to go higher. If you measure and then measure again, the second reading will tend to be higher. And so the low side, what we found is that often what caused it to read low was that you missed the point. And if you go back and measure it again, you're not invalidating the results. Often what you find is if you move around on that point, here, I'll just borrow my little AcuGraph probe for a prop here, that if you move around on that point a little bit, you find that you were off and you get to the actual point and it suddenly jumps up and it's close to the reading from the other side. And so AcuGraph now asks you if you want to go back and remeasure your splits, and it'll have you measure the side that was low, because if it was low, that means you probably missed the point. And in doing that, what we found is that approximately 80% of the splits were actually just due to measurement technique or location. And so now by remeasuring, splits have become quite a bit more rare. And when you find one and you remeasured and it's still there, you found a real split that really needs treatment. But I'm finding that those, one on a graph, occasionally two, but often one or none is where I'm ending up with splits. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that spleen 21, although AcuGraph will still recommend it if you have 4 or more splits, you almost never will have 4 or more splits if your technique and location is good. So great question, thank you. And Alok says, doing yourself is difficult for many patients on spleen 21. I agree. The chicken wing technique is not for everyone, and it's frankly not necessarily even the best way to do it. It's just an option. I think that the tack option is probably the cleaner way to go there. All righty, other questions or thoughts? I have a discussion question I'd like to throw out, and I'd like to invite people to unmute and talk. My question is this. We talked in this unit, we talked about electroacupuncture. We went through even kind of the basic physics of electricity and how to understand words like frequency and amplitude and polarity and all of that. But what I'd like to talk about is how many of those of us that are in the meeting today use some form of electrical acupuncture versus not using electricity at all, just using needles or some other mode. But how many of us are actually using electricity with acupuncture, and how's that working out for you? Who'd like to talk about that? I know some of you brave souls are.
I don't know if I'm muted or not.
Yeah, I hear you, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Okay. This is all very interesting to me. I'm not an acupuncturist, but I'm an auricular therapist.
Ah.
I do have the Pro Plus unit that I do use, and I don't just use it on the ears. I use it on other like the meridians and that sort of thing. But I also use laser, and I'm trying to think of anything else that I use. But I have found that they're very effective. I've watched some of your other videos and taken some ideas of what I can do to kind of integrate what you've got into what I've got. So I'm not sure how your device would serve me, since I'm not an acupuncturist. But I always like to learn more and to see what's out there. And I don't know, what do you think?
Well, I have a question for you. I'm curious, since you are doing auriculotherapy, our little discussion of electricity, did you watch that one on kind of the basics of, okay, did you find that information useful or helpful clinically, or was that more just Adrian being a nerd? Because I do that.
But I've always used some form of either biofeedback or some other kind of device that uses frequencies and that sort of thing. So that was not new to me, but I always like to see somebody else's take on it, how they're using it, and so on.
Cool.
I'm very, very much for these devices and the use of frequencies and so forth.
Yeah.
I'm having a little bit of a challenge with my little stim probe, though. For some reason or other, the little light is not, it's coming on, but it doesn't just turn off when it's supposed to. So I don't know if there's something that I'm doing incorrectly. This just started recently, and I've had it for a year at least.
There are a
Is
couple
it-
of settings.
Well, let me ask you. So I've got a Stim Plus Pro here,
Uh-huh.
and when I measure, you see the lights, and then it goes back down, and there's one light always on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about?
The little blue light at the tip does not go off. It stays on or I have to, in order to get any kind of reading, I have to keep my finger on that top button.
Low battery.
You think it's as simple as that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
First thing I would do, change those batteries out. The little end just comes right off like that. And you've got your 2 coin cell batteries right in there.
Uh-huh.
And you just tap a couple times to get them out and change them. If you need batteries, let us know. We have them available.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Good.
I'm
Thank you for
finding
bringing that
all
up.
of this very, very interesting, and I appreciate your sharing all of this information with us.
Oh, great. Glad to hear that. Thank you for joining. Daryl said, how do you raise your hand?
I'll answer that.
Go ahead.
Across the bottom of your screen, there's a little smiley face thing that says reactions. If you click on that, you can see a clap and a thumb and a heart emojis, but then you see the bigger button that says raise hand. Like I'll click mine right now, and it'll show that my hand is raised. In my picture up in the top corner, there's a little hand in the button. Then we know your hand is raised. But we want to hear from you anyway, Daryl. Would you like to talk? I'm going to unraise my hand.
I'm looking at it. I don't have that little hand raised thing, or maybe I don't see it, but that's neither here nor there. I wanted to answer Adrian's question about who's using electrical devices in their practice. And just like Cheryl, I am not I consider myself an auricular therapist. I'm not an acupuncturist, but in practice, I'm a naturopath, and using I started with the Stim Plus Pro, and now I'm on I use very regularly the 0.0 Select with Adrian's help. Thank you. That has changed everything about my practice. Every naturopathic session that I do, and I do several a day, they all start with an AcuGrowth scan, and they all end with an Auriculotherapy session. And the rest of what I do is balanced in between that. But without this, I don't know where I would be in my practice. And when I started in my practice, it didn't have anything to do with this. This wasn't even on my radar, but it has so changed the way I practice that I can't even say enough about it. So yes, I absolutely use it, not just sometimes, not just every day, but on every single person that comes in.
Oh man, that is awesome. Daryl, you made my day. Thank you. That's so cool. And I'm glad it's working out for you. That's wonderful. Did you watch the training? Did you watch the modules? Are you joining?
No, I work all throughout the week, so I was going to get to it this weekend. Is it new, or is it something that's already was in the recordings already?
It was in the recordings, but it wasn't available for free unless you were an enterprise level user.
I am, so I have seen it. Then I've seen everything in there.
Okay, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, and thank you for that. There's one other. Oh, and we've got a hand from Kalyani. Thanks, Daryl. Was there anything else? I don't want to.
No, that was it. I wanted to just answer that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Go ahead. Is it Kalyani?
Yeah. Hi, you guys. I just jumped in here. I have a question. Yes, I use electrical stim. I connect clips to needles with just traditional electrical stim. I use the, I'm not remembering the name of it, Stim Plus Pro. It's the device that, this is what I want to ask you about, the one that has the sliding sleeve.
Oh,
Point
yeah,
of
Point of
Select?
Select Digital. Got it
Yes.
right here.
Yeah, that one. I got that from you guys when I got the AcuGraph a couple years ago when you guys came out to San Diego.
Oh,
So yeah, love that, love all of it. But that one, I'm noticing the sleeve isn't sliding easily, and I'm thinking it needs to do that in order to get a good read. So do I need to do something so that that continues the maintenance on the item?
I'm glad that you brought that up. There are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, most common cause for that, and I'm going to kind of put my hand here so you can see this. I'm going to try to anyway. When you slide that down, okay, and you see the internal tip and then the external sleeve, and then the internal tip can also slide. The number one reason that there are sliding difficulties is that you get dirt lodged down in here. And so you can take and slide back the external and you can clean this with an alcohol pad. That's number one. And then number two, and this will be even harder to show, but I'm going to give it a solid try. Here, I'll use my phone because yeah, that's too dark, I think. Maybe I need something
A
lighter.
white tip. I can see the little white tip.
Yeah. And what I wanted to show on the little white tip is that sometimes that black rubber sleeve
Yes.
will tend to bunch up right down here at the end. And I don't know if it expands over time or what happens, but it tends to bunch up and expand and get a little sticky so that it doesn't want to slide. And what we've had people do is actually just take like an X-Acto knife and just trim a tiny bit, just a millimeter around that black sleeve, to trim back just the very end of it. And when we've had folks that were getting stuck, that did the trick and took care of it. So that's a couple things you might try there.
Can I use a fingernail file to file it around it, or do you want to use an X-Acto knife file?
Yeah, that worked great. Yeah.
In terms of effectiveness and frequency, what is I don't always get the right area, the frequency, to shift it. I just keep going. It's still effective, or are we looking at a decrease in effectiveness when you don't go with the Nogier frequencies?
It is still effective. I think the Nogier frequencies are optimal. But even if you're not using the Nogier frequencies, for years, all I used was the Stim Plus Pro, and that only has 5, 10, and 20. So I would pretty much go with 10 everywhere and still got great results. I think that kind of you get some enhancement by using Nogier, but don't feel bad if you don't use the exact frequency for each location.
I apologize if this has already been addressed, but can you or Kimberly talk to the nature of having nothing showing up on an ear versus or having something on one ear, not the other, but this idea that nothing shows up, that's interesting to me.
I had a conversation with a practitioner this week who called with that very problem. And he was trying to test himself. He couldn't get anything. And he tried to test his son and he couldn't get anything. And then he called us because he tried 2 people and it seemed to be a problem. And what he found was he tended to have dry skin anyway. And so things don't want to read electrically. That's just a factor with skin. Everybody's different. He tends toward dry skin. But what he found was he started to kind of get in here and scrub, and he found out, looking closely, he said, man, there's a lot of dead, dry skin in my ear. And so he said he got in there and scrubbed, got a lot out. It doesn't sound super pleasant, but he said he got to where, the skin was nice and shiny, and then he went and read, and it lit up like a Christmas tree, all kinds of points. And so the moral of the story there is either oil or just kind of accumulated dead skin, which we all get, can really interfere. And so don't feel bad about taking like an alcohol pad and really kind of giving a good scrub and then letting it dry and see if that doesn't make a difference.
Okay, cool.
I have one more thing to add to that. If you will treat, even if nothing is showing up, if you will treat Shen Men and 0.0, do that as a base treatment. And oftentimes that will make the shift in the ear where the other points will show up.
Okay, cool.
So use them as a primer, I guess.
Yeah, that kind of prime the pump. Yeah. Good
And
reminder.
any
Thank
theory
you.
why the right ear versus left ear compared with, I've got the right knee pain, but it's the left ear knee showing, or any kind of theories about that? I mean, I don't really care to treat both ears or either ears, whatever, but I'm just wondering if you, Kimberly, or either of you, Adrian, have seen a correlation that's you can count on.
When I'm treating, if you have right shoulder pain, I'm looking for your shoulder pain on the right ear. If I was treating digestive issues or emotional issues, I would be treating both ears. If I was treating hemorrhoids, I'd be treating both ears. But if I was treating sciatic pain on one side, I can go find the sciatic point and then have you try to recreate the pain, and then the pain will be gone. So I tend to go pain related based on the correct side.
Great. Thank
And
you.
I would add that for me, more often than not, I mean, the majority of the time it's on the same side ear. When it's not, you said any theories? Yeah, I've got theories about why it would show on the opposite ear, but they're only theories. I can't point to any studies or any science or anything concrete that says, oh, well, here's when that happens. But it does happen.
And I'll also add, I mean, if we're going to just get into auriculotherapy, a lot of people don't realize that if you're, let's just say you're finding points on the front of the ear for shoulder pain based on your Auriculo 360 app. If you're looking for them on the front of the ear and they're not really showing up the way you want them to, go to that same exact location on the back of the ear, because the front of the ear has to do with tendons and ligaments and bones, and the back of the ear has more to do with musculature. And sometimes just doing that switch and going to the back of the ear will bring to the surface again what you're looking for.
Far out. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Kalyani. So Henry's mom asked, I use Chinese Meridian Health Analysis Expert System. I would like to know what is the difference between these two. And honestly, I'm not familiar with that system. I don't know that one, so I apologize. I can't really say much about it.
I'd like to chime in just a,
Go ahead.
I looked it up because she was asking and just did a quick Google search. And with all of the symposiums that I've been to through the years, and they'll have the vendors, oftentimes there'll be something that somebody will come to me and say, oh, that device is kind of like the one over there. And it's a system possibly that measures, like Adrian has all of those systems sitting on his desk that measures. There are different types of systems that are specific for measuring the electrical skin resistance at acupuncture points, but hands down, the difference between ours and any other device out there is your reported findings, your comparisons, your notes, your supplemental dietary and herbal and all of the components all tied together. It's a game changer. You may be able to find a device like even what Adrian has behind him, but to have the whole package all in one, where it becomes something you can clinically use to build your practice, that would be the difference that I would highlight.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one other thought. Thanks for that, Kimberly. The other thought is this: how many of you are familiar with what's called EAV, or electroacupuncture according to Vol? I see some hands, I see some nods. Yeah. EAV devices. The EAV system was developed by Dr. Reinhard Vol of Germany, and he came up with some electrical testing correlations to various things. And because you use a probe and you test points, a lot of people think, oh, well, that's just like AcuGraph. It's the same. But that's kind of like saying, well, yeah, a dump truck is the same thing as a sports car because they both have four wheels. Yeah, okay, they both have four wheels, but completely different purposes. And EAV generally does not test actual acupuncture points on actual acupuncture meridians. it tests a whole bunch of other points from that system, but that's not acupuncture. And then it's generally done for the purpose or intent of testing things like supplements, remedies, homeopathics, even allergy testing. There have been a lot of different claims made for that system. And so because of that, it's had a lot of regulatory troubles over the years. And, you know, companies have been shut down, systems have been seized out of practitioners' offices by FDA people that show up and literally just walk in with a warrant and say, we're taking that, and there goes your equipment. Because claims get made, oh, we can detect cancer, oh, you know, it. So my point of all that comes down to purpose. Yes, both kinds of systems test
Measure.
electrical points, but AcuGraph has remained true to being completely acupuncture focused. And it's all about the actual genuine acupuncture meridians, the meridian balance, and the points that are used to restore balance. And we're the only system on the market, to my knowledge, that does that. Even other Ryodoraku systems, there are some from foreign countries and so on, that what they've done is they've tried to add a whole bunch of stuff like, oh, here's the report all about your organs, and oh, here's a report all about allergies or whatever. And people have asked us to try to add that on. And we've kind of generally held the line and said, no, that's not what Ryodoraku is for, and that's not what it's about. And anything that we do to try to add all that stuff would be pushing the envelope off into something that is not, frankly, even acupuncture. So I don't know the system that's being asked about, but in general, almost always when somebody asks me about another system and we go investigate it, we find out it's an EAV system. So more than you ever wanted to know about EAV. There you go. Okay, Renee says, is there a problem using the Stim Plus Pro on a patient with a pacemaker? There may not be a problem, but it is contraindicated. And it's contraindicated simply because if you use an electrical modality on a patient with a pacemaker, I don't care what electrical modality it is, if you use anything electric and there's later a problem with the pacemaker, you could be liable. Even if there's no proof that what you did had any bad effect, and even if it's 6 months later, you don't want to put yourself in that position. And you certainly don't want to put yourself in a position of anyone even thinking that you may have interfered with a life-saving device like a pacemaker. So that's why the contraindication. Now, I do know people that regularly graft folks with pacemakers, that regularly treat electrically people with pacemakers or other implanted devices. I do not recommend it, but it's, you know, it's their practice and their professional license to risk. So that's what I have to say about that. Okay, let's see. How do I explain beautiful green grafts to patients who have pretty serious health issues? Every time I see that happen, and I think I'm correct in saying every time, I don't use that word lightly, but if not every time, at least 99 times out of 100, when I see what's called a beautiful green graft on a very sick patient, that beautiful green graft is averaging 15 or 20. Everything is just all the way at the bottom. And because there's so little variability, you can't call anything high, low, or split because everything's in the basement. And so everything ends up green. And we cover that in some of our training, that when you have a graft that is that low, what you've really done is you've gotten to the point that the equipment simply can't detect with enough sensitivity to definitively say what's high, low, and split, because everything is barely hanging on. And so when we've seen very sick patients with grafts like that, that's generally what's going on. And when patients like that recover and the graft starts to come up, you start to see all kinds of variabilities. So one thing you can do in a case like that is measure a different set of points. So if you measured the Yuan source points and everything's really low and therefore green across the board, go measure the Jingwell points and see what you find there. And you might find a very different picture.
So Renee spoke further, and you won't see it for a few minutes, but she says sometimes the graph is actually high. And I'll add to that. I wrote a blog post. Maybe Shireen can find it. I wrote a blog post about a cancer patient that I was treating, and I was treating her really, really regularly with acupuncture. So if I have a patient who is very sick and I am treating them regularly with acupuncture, we're doing a good job getting the acupuncture pathways to move the way they need to move. And I remember sitting with this patient, and her cancer was, she had pancreatic cancer, and it was pretty extreme. And she was going to fly to Washington and go to a specialized hospital. And that day was her last treatment with me before she was going to leave. And her graph was all green. And I just held her hand and I said, you know what? This means that your body is doing its very best to fight off what is going on. We've put you in the best possible place so that you can go on and do what you need to do. So that was an extreme example with cancer patient. But when my patients come in and they still have a lot of symptoms, but we've worked to the point of getting an all green graph, that means energy is flowing where it's supposed to be flowing, and they are in the perfect position to heal. Then I don't have to treat them to balance the graph that day. I can simply go in and treat what the problem is. I can dig down to the chief complaint. So in time, you may experience stories like that, but that's come with lots and lots of years of AcuGraph use.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would add too that if you ever have a graph that doesn't seem to reflect what you know is wrong, go with your intuition, go with your other diagnostic methods, and consider what I said is graph the other set of points and find out if what you're certain is there is going to show up in the other set of points. I've seen that happen before too, where you know there's an issue, it's not coming up in the source points. You look in the Jing wells and there it is.
And remember that your graph is one diagnostic tool. You
Yeah.
went to college and you learned a whole lot of other diagnostic tools. If you're Daryl and you're a naturopath, then you have blood analysis. You have many things that you can look at. If you're a TCM practitioner, you can look at tongue and pulse. Those all can be added in. This is one more way of diagnosing.
Yeah. Okay, we have Kalyani and then we have Stein, I believe. Go ahead, Kalyani.
So when I get good at using the AcuGraph and doing the readings, will I have less requests to retest some of the points after I've done the initial? Because I get kind of frustrated because I do the whole thing. It's like, I got to do 10 others again. And then sometimes I get it and there's only like one needs to be redone. Is it my testing technique that's getting in my way here?
Honestly, yeah, it often is when you're new.
Two things to think about. One is point location, and we've done many trainings on that, and I think we get into that as you go further in the training. So it's getting good with the point location from an electrical point of view, but it's also getting consistent with your pressure. The pressure on the left, the pressure on the right. Sometimes you're talking with the patient and you might start out lighter on one side and then you get a heavier hand when you get to the other. So it's just practicing consistency of pressure over and over and over again. That's what will help you.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
And by the way, it never goes away completely. I graph and graphed somebody yesterday and I had to remeasure 3 points. It happens.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, Stein.
Yeah. Hi from
Hi.
Norway. Yeah. I'm not too familiar with the AcuGraph system, but I use other measurements, electrostimulation and stuff like that. So, I'm kind of agreeing with you with the kind of low measurements points. When you get those, it's kind of hard to recognize what's behind the underlying problem or stuff like that. So it's a good equipment to see the underlying acquirements, what you need to approach in your treatment plan, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So but the system I use is based on Ryodoraku. It's
Okay.
it's the same philosophy, you know, about how the crossing of the energy and how to balance the body and make it up to speed to recognize itself for the healing properties the body has, you know. So I use a lot of Stim Plus Pro in my treatments, you know, when things is getting too slow, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the herbs don't quite do their power, and my other techniques like thought field therapy and NLP, which because my kind of occupation mainly bases on the mindset, you know, the body and spirit plan, you know, how thought affects the body. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you're quite negative or quite things just builds up and all kind of things shows on you, you know. If you have those kinds of things in your reality in your life, it always takes all of your energy and all of your minerals and vitamins and just use it all up to things they don't need to use it on, you know.
I
So
think
when I use this,
go ahead.
yeah, so when those things happens, you know, I always use your what's it called? I just call it air seeds, or I also have gold and silver bullets
Yeah.
I put on the spots, you know. So I always combine those things in a way to power up the body to help it release all those blocks, because every time I see a crossing on the graph, it's kind of no communication, you know. So as long as I just get those blocks up, the body communicates on a whole new level.
Yeah.
And the thoughts also just lightens up in a way.
You know,
So the whole
that ties into actually a topic that I wanted to mention from the training that we did, which is the idea that I call informational medicine, where we talk about energy medicine, we talk about electrical properties, we talk about moving electricity around, but really it's communication. Like you just said, it's more than just the electrical impulses, but it's the information that needs to flow and harmonize in the body. That's what chi really is. So I love the way that you put that. That's really excellent.
What
Yeah.
an amazing time of the world that we live in, where informational medicine and technology is all around us. And when you can graph a patient and you can show them how you think about their body, how you understand what is going on. And that information is on a computer screen right in front of them. And you can click on it and you can show them. That's when the light bulbs began to come on. I was in
Yeah.
a marketing seminar all weekend, and I popped away from that to jump over here today. But one of the things a statement that they made, it says, what you measure, you can improve. And I was like, that's an AcuGrowth statement. That's a blog post. I'm sure that I'll turn that into something. But what you measure, you can improve. And that's when a patient sees their messy graph and you show them that you understand what is going on in their body in a way that their eyes can see and their concept from their perspective they can understand, then it changes everything. And because of that, I've been able to help more patients because they're willing to buy in. They're willing to buy in and say, okay, somebody understands my body in a way that other doctors don't. And having a technology modern approach to combine with my ancient Chinese theory, I love it. It makes me happy to go to work every day.
Yeah, it's like a combination between music and poetry, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. If we could, we've got Jared with his hand up, and I by the way, just want to say, Jared, I'm so glad to always have you joining us. You're like one of the most regular of the regulars, and thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Adrian. Sorry, it's been a while since I've been able to be on here, but things have been really busy. No, I just wanted to mention one of the things that we were talking about, or you were talking about, with internal communication between the channels or pathways, and what Stein had brought up with blockages. One thing that I find, I treat a lot of veterans, and I treat a lot of veterans that are Vietnam era veterans. And so they are generally on a laundry list of medications. And I find that that is always a big block for the internal pathways. And so opening those internal pathways oftentimes will help balance the graph faster than just treating, you know, the general meridians or whatnot. And then I know this is a bit off topic, but also the ion pumping cords makes a huge difference in that getting things to communicate better. So just wanted to bring that up.
Do you do a lot of the divergent channel treatment with the ion cords?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. I actually do more of that than I do just standard acupuncture.
Yeah.
And those of you who don't know what that is, it is coming as we move forward.
Sorry.
And you'll have lots of questions, and we'll definitely, that's always a fun conversation, right?
Yeah. And don't be sorry, Jared, because I find that to be kind of the most profound, deepest, important treatment. And that's actually where I try to go when treating, is I use the ion cords if I can. So thanks for bringing that up. And that,
sure.
Go ahead.
One thing that happened was that when I first started with treating veterans, I wasn't getting very good results, and I was trying everything. And so when the ion cords came out, and we had the whole lecture on the divergent channels, I'm like, aha, let's try that. And that was a huge improvement. Plus, I think the people really like the cords. They think it's kind of fun. So,
well, yeah. And that's part of the information going into the system is their own thoughts about the treatment. That matters. So very cool. One thing I wanted to bring up, and our hour is almost up here, but actually two things I want to bring up, if I may. One thing is that I realize that there are many on here who don't have AcuGrowth and maybe aren't that familiar with it. We've touched on it just a little bit as we've been talking today. And what I would like to offer to those who don't yet have AcuGrowth is that we offer a live consultation, kind of a one-on-one Zoom meeting where we can talk. I can answer your questions. I can show you AcuGrowth. We can walk through it. You can really get a good feel for the product. And so I wanted to make that available, and I will show you here how you can arrange that for yourself, let me just pop in here and go. If you go to AcuGrowth.com over on our website, there we go. Okay, if you go to AcuGrowth.com, then right here in the top right corner, you'll see book a consultation. And you can just click that and it'll bring up a calendar. It'll bring up openings. You can click on the opening that you want, but first and most important is set your time zone so that it'll show everything in your time zone. You can book an opening for half an hour and we can talk about AcuGrowth and I can show it to you. So for those that would find that useful that don't already own AcuGrowth, avail yourselves of it. If you do already own AcuGrowth, but you have questions or you need to talk, then the best thing to do is go on our website at AcuGrowth.com, and right down here in the bottom right corner is the chat window. And so if you click there, you can chat. We have live people here. Whenever we're open, we have folks here waiting to talk to you. And if it's a question they can answer, they will. If it's a technical issue, they'll get you the tech support you need. If it's a practitioner kind of a question, then they'll refer it over to Kimberly or over to me and we'll talk. So I wanted to let you know, avail yourself of the resources we've got for you. We're glad to help. That's why we're here. And then there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is we have, yeah, here we go. We have some specials going on right now. We always do this in conjunction with the symposium because we're talking about and teaching about new equipment and new ideas. If there's something that you're looking for, I'm not here to give you a sales pitch today, but I just want to let you know that there are a lot of things on sale in conjunction with this free training we're providing. And so if you go to meridiatech.com, in the shop, you just go to symposium specials, and I think we'll put that up in the chat window here as well. And you can look at the various items that are on sale, including $300 off AcuGrowth right now. So for those that don't yet own AcuGrowth, if you're interested, it's good timing. Let's see if I can stop the screen share. There we go. Okay. Before we finish up, any other questions or thoughts or ideas to bring up? Kalyani, go ahead.
Yes, I had an interesting thing. I was just doing the AcuGrowth yesterday, and I went to just to do a quick high and low treatment on the points that were recommended. And I was going to use the cold laser, the red and blue. And I assume, did I get this right, that if it's high, I'm gonna use the blue to bring it down, and if it's low, I'm gonna use the red. But on two of the channels, one was high and one was low, it was pointing to the same point, TB3, and I'm like, oh, it's the same point for two channels. One's high and one's low. I use the red, but I don't know what that means.
You did it right. Yeah, you default to red, and when it does that, it's using the 5 elements, the Shen or the Ko cycle, to move chi from a high channel to a low channel with 1 point, which is kind of cool. So use the red laser on that point. You did it right.
Okay. I guessed. Thank you.
Yeah, good job. And Stein, you've still got your hand up. Do you have more?
No. We have a question about.
Do I still have my hand up?
Oh,
Yep.
your hand is still up on the screen, Stein. I didn't know.
We have a technical question on live updates.
Oh, okay. Let me ask that. So Alok says, whenever I open my AcuGrowth 5, it gives a pop-up that you have an update, but then it doesn't update and sometimes it hangs up. Is it because of my 3 to 4-year-old laptop? No, usually you have to tell it to update and it will download an installer and you have to run the installer. So you might want to look in your downloads folder to see if it downloaded it, but it didn't run. Or you can go to the website at AcuGrowth.com and you can manually download the update under the support section and update it that way. So if you have more trouble, go to our chat and we'll get you on with a technician that'll help you do it. And then why is there not inclusion of treatment suggestion for diabetes, low blood hemoglobin, and stones in the gallbladder or the kidney.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you are graphing a patient and you have the graph information in front of you, and you're going to learn this as you continue to move through the different modules, what it tells you in the graph is kind of the root treatment. That's where there are, if all the acupuncture pathways are a map of what's happening in the body, that's where there's a roadblock. That's where there's a problem on the roads. So AcuGraph will tell you how to balance those imbalances so chi will flow the way it needs to. Then in our reference section, under conditions, you can actually go in and find branch treatments. So I just opened conditioned and typed in the word kidney, and the word urinary kidney stones came up. So I would suggest that you go look in the reference section for information on branch treatments.
Yeah, so kidney stone, there is a branch treatment or a treatment suggestion under the word urinary kidney stone. And there is a suggestion under diabetes. And so perhaps you just didn't see them there. If you go into the reference section, it does give some suggestions for acupuncture treatments for those items.
And it doesn't say gallbladder stones, but if you type in gallbladder, you'll come up with TCM gallbladder damp heat. And that's a good combination.
All right.
What I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about kidney stones, it's when you push too much vitamin C in the system, you kind of promote the making of kidney stones. If I am right, this is just a hypothesis, you know, of my own experience. When people eat too much of one thing, it kind of pushes other things in balance, you know. So it's to find the right balance from people to people, what their kind of body needs, and find that balance, you know, in either the diet or things you can do otherwise to relieve those things. But every kind, it's kind of kidney stones, or I'm not quite sure about the gallbladder stones, but the vitamin C overdose, in a way, if you push too much, it kind of crystallizes in the kidneys. And as we know, the kidney and it's kind of the energy center. It's kind of the master of the controller of the whole immune system and stuff like that, you know. So the kidney and the gallbladder is kind of the two things that got to work together, so they don't attack the lungs or the liver, in a way.
Yeah.
You know, the five kind of star inside of, you know, the control center in the 5 element system, you know.
Yeah.
So when too much things accumulate in the liver or gallbladder, it kind of attacks the lungs, and then it goes from anger to sorrow. It's kind of interesting, you know.
And it's good that you bring up the emotions, which is a whole separate and very important aspect to this work. But we are unfortunately at the end of our time and need to let everybody get back to their practice day. But I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for joining us today. Thank you for the questions. we are looking forward to the future Hangouts, where we're going to, for each module every week, we're going to do one of these. We're going to talk about aspects of that particular module. So bring your questions, bring your ideas, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. And next week is
Yeah, I was going to say.
scheduled differently. It's on Wednesday. Due to a conflict here in the office, we couldn't do it Friday next week. So it's the one that's a little out of the ordinary. Look on the schedule there under the Hope Symposium, and you'll find that the schedule's there, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Meanwhile, keep doing the good that you do and blessing lives. And thank you for being here. Kimberly?
May I make a suggestion? As you're going through and you're watching your modules, and if you have questions, write those questions down so that when you come to this event, you can get that information to us. And if for some reason you're not going to be able to make the live event, if you go into chat and where Dr. Larson was just showing you, and you let our team know that you have that question, then we'll make sure to answer it. So if you chance to go back and re-listen, then the answer will be there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody.